Came round, touchdown, heat waves. Since back in the day, your boy been center stage. Should've been on Broadway. I learned the hard way that love ain't always the answer. Don't play. There's a war outside. Might just catch a stray walking down that hallway. Yeah. Ain't no landing zone when you flies this, and my Oculus is from a bird's eye view. Catching all of the parameter, ain't an amateur unless we talking losses. In other words, it don't happen often, but I took enough to know what the cost is. Still soaring, ain't no landing zone, ain't shit important, but the mission though. In my younger years, I wasted time with holes, and the burning holes in my pocket. So distracted, block my eye sockets. I'm taking off and recharge my rocket. Ain't falling off unless God say drop it. They nodding off whenever you be the topic. You fabric soften the hardly hard enough back to audit them. Niggas ain't worth my time. Had to cut them off my line. I'm getting this green like limes and keeping my spirit aligned. I'm flying the red eye high as a bitch. I'm a Jedi. But forcing this shit ain't my MO. Speaking prosperity, going to my dinner, building my mind like a temple. So much for keeping it simple, nigga. Hey,
nigga, I'm keeping it simple. Ain't worried about a nigga who got a pistol. Esoteric chopper came with a missile. Speaking on my name, God gon' get you. Give you an early dismissal. Niggas really wanted war when we was just keeping it civil. Now I gotta use more of my mental. Got a big head to stay on the swivel. Fake love was making me cripple. Now I'm back on the shit that I meant to do. Yeah, I'm sorry, little baby, can't fuck with you. I be running around till I'm in the booth. I've been making this money, it's coming through. I just let it clock in, do what it do. I've been watching it flip like skate 2. Like, yeah. I can't really be focused on too much bullshit nowadays. Bullshit nowadays. I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing in this place. Be doing in this place. I can't really be focused on too much bullshit nowadays. Bullshit nowadays. I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing in this place. Be doing in this place.
came round, touchdown, heat waves. Since back in the day, your boy been center stage. Should've been on Broadway. I learned the hard way that love ain't always the answer. Don't play. There's a war outside. Might just catch a stray walking down that hallway. Yeah.
What up, what up, what up? It's your boy Dave B. Watching Dave B on TV, where we go beyond the everyday bullshit that people be consuming on a day-to-day basis. And today I'm going to be breaking down what I call planetary psychology. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking, it's going to be a series. We're going to be taking each planet and we're going to be diving into basically the psychology behind the planet. And what I mean by that is like the psychological influences that that planet can have on an individual. Now, how we're going to be observing this is going to be going through the different phases that a planet goes through when it's in different positions, aka different signs. So if you're not familiar with, the basic astrology, basically, each planet has an exalted spot where it's at its high point, right? That's like its most excited energy. That's when it's at its full capacity and it's going full throttle. You know what I'm saying? This is where the energy is the most intense. And then there's along with that, so there's an exaltation. Then there's what we call the fall, which is the lowest point of where that planet is. So when that planet is in that specific sign, it's like the lowest point that that planet is at, which results in kind of most people might associate it with negativity, but it's not always negative. It just means that the planet is looking at uh it's not in its a place it likes to be. So, it causes maybe difficulty with expressing the energies from that planet and things of that nature. You know what I'm saying? Then there's the home of the planet. Of course, most planets, majority of planets have a day side home, an external home, right? And then they have a night side home. So this is where that planet is still at home and comfortable, but it's more of an internal process. And then when it's at the day side home, that's when it's external. That's when you'll see that planet express itself outwardly. You know what I'm saying? But it's still home. It's still in a comfortable space. Think about you at home. When you're at home during the day. This is probably you involving yourself in your favorite things. You at home at night, it's probably you chilling, kicking back, and having a good time, but still, in your own protected space. And then we have a planet that is, we usually certain planets have what's called a way, which is kind of like that planet when it's out doing errands. So there's errands that a planet would do at night, and that'll be like the night side of the away position. And then there's energies where that planet is away at work, you know what I'm saying, during the day. So that's that planet having to carry out certain duties and obligations. That's its responsibilities, but it's still, again, think about you when you're outside the home. This is you kind of having to deal with the world, which isn't always bad. but it might be not as comfortable as when you in a home position. So when you're looking at your chart and you seeing what planet, what area of life, or not area of life, but what sign you have each planet in, you can start to put together maybe what that planet is experiencing. So the reason this is relevant is because each planet carries a certain energy with it that relates to it. Basically, like if we want to look at astrology in general, right? Astrology, I like to observe it as a tool. So when you're looking at astrology, you start to pick up on the fact that each planet represents just an energy in general. And from these energies, the different things that you as an individual might be trying to participate in life, you will come into contact with or have to utilize these energies in a way that, you know, allows you to kind of get the experience you want out of life and things like that. And trust, when I say this, it's not about getting so confined to astrology, thinking that, oh, well, astrology is everything, and kind of looking at it as some kind of religion. It's not that. It's merely a tool, something that we can use to kind of give more meaning and definition to what we might be experiencing as energies that we can't necessarily put a word to or put a name to, even though there is words and names that we can associate with these energies. But certain things like understanding transits, what certain energies are going through certain signs. And see, when you understand something like the psychology of a planet, you can start to assess what you as an individual with your own uh, planetary alignments, you can start to understand how certain things are influencing you and affecting you. So you don't have to just assume that because you're experiencing a certain thing, whether it be negative or positive, that that's the end all be all. This kind of in some way gives you more versatility and power when it comes to going about your life and how you want to live it and doing your thing. Now, let's get into the planet of this, the topic of the planet that we're going to be diving into this time is Venus. Now, I would have did this on a Venus day, aka yesterday, Friday, but what I'm saying, it is what it is. So we're going to dive into Venus and what Venus represents as an energy as a whole first. So Venus itself represents love, appreciation, value, and support. So when we're looking at the planet Venus, that's what is going to be, it's going to be composed of. Wherever we have Venus at, that's how we go about expressing love. That's how we show support. That's how we also expect to receive support in a lot of ways as well. Now, Venus is a lot different than other planets you might associate with love, because some people associate love with just the feeling, right? And we're going to get into that basically when I'm going through the different positions of Venus. But for the most part, a lot of times people, what they consider Venus is really the moon, what I'm saying, as far as comfort and security, safety, and things like that, connection. A lot of times that falls more so on the responsibility of the moon. But when it comes to Venus, Venus is how you show love. This is like what you would maybe consider a love language. This is the things that you appreciate from your partner or from anything you're interacting, that you are trying to kind of obtain. Venus in a lot of ways is also our wants, things that we want close to us, things that make us feel good, things that can lead to energies like feeling safe, but they're actually not necessarily directly correlated with safety and security like the moon is, right? So I got my notes and things like that. I'm probably gonna make these, if y'all can see them, what I'm saying, and I know it's backwards or mirrored, but for the most part, I'm probably gonna put these in PDF form and make them available for everybody so that y'all can download and keep these on your person for yourselves. You know what I'm saying? Make it downloadable for free so y'all can have notes on these types of things so you can understand. And this is really getting behind the nature of these planets, right? Understanding the actual nature. So no matter where you have Venus at, you can start to understand just the psychology of Venus, the nature of Venus and love, and what it represents, referring to the planets and things like that in astrology. You could just get a basic idea of the nature, and then you can apply that to whatever position you actually have Venus in. So you can get a better overall understanding of what Venus represents. And then now you can apply it to different aspects of your life however you see fit, based upon, again, I might not like what I'm going to be talking about is just where Venus is when it's in certain points. Now, based upon where your Venus is, what sign you have Venus in, you can start to calculate and say, okay, well, if I have Venus in this sign, this is, such and such close to that aspect, or it's close to that aspect. So I know what, you can start to follow that train of thought. And then aside from astrology in general, you can start to understand love and its role in your life in general. You know what I'm saying? But let's dive right in. So I'm going to be starting with the planet's exaltation. So this is, like I said before, the highest point. This is the planet in the exalted position is its most excited part. It's its most favorable part. It loves that. It's like being at a theme park for a little child. So this is where the energy is the most excited. And think about a little kid at his favorite place. You can get exhausted, you can go too far, you could be extreme, but at the same time, if you moderate yourself, you can have a really great time. And when we look at this energy just by itself as a concept, the nature of Venus, or in it, like today is about Venus, but any planet you put in the exaltation position, we can start to understand, okay, how do we balance this thing in the overall spectrum of our lives? Because one thing about astrology, before I get into the actual topic, right? The one thing about astrology just to keep in mind is that all of these things, like I said before, it's a tool. It's showing you, it's giving you an idea of the human natures, right? So the different vibrations that we be in when we're just going, we're as a spirit in a body. So you occupying a body, you come into contact with all these different energies, but it's understanding the nature of it that helps you be more intentional about its placement in your life and how you go about it. And even it helps you deal with negative uh you know what you might consider negative repercussions of participating in energies in a certain way. And it can also help you understand interpersonal dynamics, why you might experience like something like Venus or love in a certain way versus another individual. And again, we all different, and part of life and what makes the world go round is relationship. It's how we relate to one another, but even beyond people, also places and things, how you align with other people, places, and things. That's what we are dealing with in this third dimensional plane. It's all about positioning and angle. You know what I'm saying? Whether you're coming at things from a high angle or you're coming at it from a low angle, regardless, you're in a position, aka a space, and that's yours. And then you're always kind of looking at other positions, and you're always receiving. And then you have the opportunity to also push out. But you don't want to push out without the proper intention behind what you push out, because one thing you got to keep in mind at all times is what you put out is what you get back. Now, I'm not talking about pop culture astrology or pop psychology concepts of karma, but understand that that's just the way it flows. That's the way the universe works and things of that nature. So it won't come back. It might not come back in a very clear way how you put out something and it comes back to you. But it really goes down to what's going on in your subconscious, because that's kind of the core of everything. It's like if you were to think of a computer, it's the operating system is your subconscious. And if you don't have a clean, sufficient, productive operating system, you're going to be doing a lot of things that lead to miscalculations, misunderstandings, and getting kind of set up for situations, viruses, and things like that, making yourself more susceptible for things that could damage you, aka lead to trauma, whether it be mentally or physically. You know what I'm saying? So, without further ado, let's get into the main topic. So, Pisces, right? I mean, not Pisces, Venus. We're going to be talking about Venus as exalted point. So, Venus when it's in the sign of Pisces is exalted. So, it's at its most excited part. So, when we're thinking about the nature of love, right? Venus represents love, appreciation, value, support. Pisces represents mutable water. So when Venus is in this position, it's at its most excited. It Venus by nature, right? Love by nature thrives on emotions and feelings, being connected, the mutability. So, how even in certain ways you would associate Venus with compromise, right? So, when you think of Piscean energy, it's the king of compromise, the queen of compromise. You know what I'm saying? Pisces always is trying to figure out how I feel, how you feel, and how we can flow together. So, by nature, this is at its most excited point. Um, this is love as an emotional fantasy. So this is why Venus this is like the romantic, when we think of romance films or romance novels and things like that, this is what people a lot of times associate with love, which can be very fairy tale like, right? So that could be beneficial, because if you really think about it, right, when you get into a relationship, the honeymoon phase, and everything is beautiful, nothing that person can do is wrong, and everything is just kind of what you can allow yourself to be excited about emotionally. This is what a lot of times people associate with real love, but we're going to get into kind of the deeper aspect as we go along the travel of Venus. But let's stick right here. So this is the part of when Venus is in this position. This is the part that sparks what we consider pleasure chemicals. So when you first get into that relationship, the rush of dopamine you get from being with another individual who understands you, you know what I'm saying? And that's a key word too. Venus at its most exalted, excited point is all about understanding. You know what I'm saying? When we first get into relationships and we first interact with individuals, it's all about, oh, we have all the grace in the world because we don't know that individual yet. So we're learning, right? Now, things might rub us the wrong way, but a lot of times we're a lot more forgiving. That's another Piscean nature. Forgiveness. We overlook certain things. Again, we only might only hear what we want to hear versus being able to look at the reality of who you're interacting with, right? And we're going to get into that when we hit the next phase. So Pisces, when Venus is in Pisces, this is just giving you an idea of the nature of Venus in this position. It's like this is where, and so like I said before, regardless of where you have Venus, this is you helping you understand the concept and nature of Venus in general. So whenever you're in relation in the sense of love, appreciating, and valuing something, if you want to basically look at it like this: if you want to enhance how you go about love, or let's say you're in a relationship and you're in a somewhat of a slump or something like that, if you're trying to spice it up, say you can understand, okay, when love is in its most high point, it's about fantasy. So if you can find ways in your whatever your way is, a creative way to utilize uh Piscean concepts like being more imaginative, maybe being more understanding, trying to emotionally connect and convey ideas, being mutable, adaptable, changeable from an emotional sense. If you add and incorporate those things into whatever stale situation you might be in, regarding love and a relationship, and also value, we're gonna get into value in a second. This could increase the nature of love with whatever love you're trying to participate in your actual life. That's kind of how to utilize this. So it's like you don't have to just feel like, oh, when I'm in love, it's all bad, or it's basically giving you back the tools to help you control and direct these different things in your own life. And again, even if you're not talking about another person, even with yourself, if you're in a slump, let's say you're going through a bout of depression or you feel lonely and things like that, you need to introduce love into your life. You can raise your vibration just by understanding, okay, if I need more self-love and more love in my life, I need to incorporate maybe more Piscean concepts such as faith. I need to maybe believe in myself. I need to take care of myself, sit with myself, maybe meditate and do things that have helped me feel more emotionally aroused, as far as getting imaginative, getting in the fantasy. Now, we understand too, Venus as an exaltation can go too far. So this is where also you can develop illusion. So this will be the part of Venus that deals with obsession, to the point of, like, for instance, if you are let's say you got a crush and things like that, and you come up with all these fantasies, but you never interacted with that crush in your life. That person don't even know you exist. This is kind of where, again, love can go too far in that Piscean aspect, where, again, even though you might be at your most excited, that doesn't necessarily mean it's all good. It might actually be something leading you down to a path of destruction, self-destruction, being too compromising, being too emotionally understanding, aka somebody is kind of dubbing you or making you feel less than, somebody's kind of not valuing you, but you're too concerned with trying to emotionally understand them and match their vibration, to the point you devalue yourself. So this is Venus at its exalted point, but also the flaws of it, where you develop some kind of illusion when that's not actually the case in the reality of what's going on. And that's to my point of, when we understand these different positions, there's not necessarily something that's good and bad. It's really all relational. It's based upon what you're using, how you're going about it, your perspective, and the circumstance itself. We have to understand that when we talk about these things, it's all about context. You have to add context to help you get familiar with how these things are actually affecting you. And see, when we think of, like, we can look at these things objectively, but you still an individual going through your own subjective experience. So you have to add context for these things to make sense in your own individual life. So don't just look and say, oh, if I have Venus in Pisces, all of a sudden all my love is going to be good, and everything I participate in, I should always be in this energy. No, that's not the case. We have to, as spirits, we got to understand, you coming through like reality in this body. Yeah, you chose certain energies in your natal chart that you resonated with and felt most comfortable coming through as an expression of. However, that doesn't you also have to remember the other side of this, the fact that there's a whole 360, aka there's more energies to get familiar with. You just play favoritism with certain ones. This is why, even as you go along your journey, you got to realize that you can't just be stuck into your own zodiac. You got to learn how to do things that are opposite to your energy too. You got to learn how to do things that are squaring your energy. So you got to learn a little bit. You got to balance things a little bit. You can't just be all in uh, one space. You have to learn how to play all positions, because we are a piece of all possibilities in that sense. And all of these natures are tools that we can utilize to do what we need to do in our life and things like that. So, just keep that in mind. Now, getting back to Pisces and its exalted position. So again, this is most excited. So when we think of love as an emotional fantasy, this is where we get high on it. You know what I'm saying? All of the dopamine and the the other chemicals we'll associate with love and appreciation and value, the gratification we get from, sharing a moment or being emotionally connected with another individual or person, place, and whether it be a person, place, or thing. Because again, people can exalt themselves when it comes to how they interact with substances, to the point they abuse substances, because that substance allows them to feel the chemicals of being in some kind of fantasy land too. So this is how people also get addicted to certain substances and things like that. Excuse me. So also and to that point, think of also Pisces as escapism energy. So some people utilize love as an escape from their reality and things like that. And you can see how that can lead to a toxic situation based upon you creating this kind of false world that you can escape the responsibilities you might have in. And this can cause imbalance in your life in other areas. So when we look at the nature of love and things like that, we can see how, okay, love at its highest point is an emotional fantasy. So you got to define that fantasy for yourself. You got to be able to see through that illusion at times, right? And this kind of takes us into the next position of Venus, which is Venus in Virgo, which is representing the fall. So the exaltation, the highest point Venus could be at is Pisces. The lowest point it could be at is Virgo. But like I said before, just because it's at its fallen position, most astrologers might say that's bad or negative, but it's not actually. It's just giving you honestly, the better you can understand rather than just condemn certain things, you can utilize it for your benefit, because Venus in Virgo has a very important role in understanding that concept or of love in general. Because see, after the honeymoon phase is over, you have to deal with the reality, right? And if you want to take a relationship or any kind of love scenario further and make it applicable in a part of your life, aka your daily routine, you're gonna have to figure out how to deal with it at its lowest point, right? So love in Venus in Virgo as falling is love as a job, working for what you value, reality, and managing nervous system responses. So this is the work that actually goes into maintaining a relationship or maintaining anything you love, appreciate, support, and value, right? You have to work to get what you value. You know what I'm saying? What you value, it costs. So whether it's time or money, you're still having to put some kind of effort in consistently in order to get back what you want as far as receiving. Now, a lot of people, when it gets to the work aspect, don't necessarily always feel like doing that. I get it. You know what I'm saying? That's not what your fantasy and emotional high represents. That's the opposite of the most exciting part of love, which is the fantasy you get, the romance and the, going here, going there, creating these different memories and things like that. But when y'all come home from vacation, when y'all come home from, say there's different things that have to be worked on. And this is the part of Venus that a lot of times gets overlooked, all the way to the point where, like I said, pop culture astrology might condemn having Venus and Virgo, when Venus and Virgo is it's a very necessary part of Venus in general. You know what I'm saying? Again, this is helping everybody understand the whole nature of Venus so that you can improve that energy and concept in your life in general. So when you're going through love trials and tribulations, or let's say you trying to get into a relationship or you in one and you trying to figure out why, again, because nowadays, people will kind of sweep the work under the rug and things like that. And, there's a lot of rhetoric about, how hard it is to date in today's time. And the thing is, we just have to update our approach, right? That's one aspect. But again, understanding these concepts and the nature of these things help you understand maybe how to approach it in different ways that you might not have seen previously. So part of that aspect is, okay, how do you work on love? How do you work for what you value, right? In order to get what you want, you might have to earn it. So, but at the same time, we understand that a planet when it's fallen is still not the most exciting part. It might be a necessary part, but it also has to be balanced. So it's kind of like you have to, just like how you work for a paycheck and that value has to be in alignment. It's the same thing with anything you're participating in. As far as what you value, you have to make sure what you're getting out of it is still on a realistic sense worth what you're putting in. You know what I'm saying? But you can't get anything out if you don't put effort and work in. So just because certain things might not make you feel good in the moment, it's still the Virgo aspect of Venus, or Venus and Virgo teaches you that, hey, just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's all bad, or doesn't mean it's not necessary. Sometimes you have to work. Sometimes you have to go through some of the hard conversations or some of the hard aspects of dealing with something on a day-to-day basis. So sometimes you have to figure out how you can manage certain things. And part of the key to that is, I put managing nervous system responses, because Virgo also deals with the nervous system. So things that make you put you in panic mode, things that make you want to fight or flight, these different things again. And when we talk about nervous system responses, this is even the rhetoric we understand now, when we talk about individuals who have an attachment styles. Like when you be like, oh, this person's an avoidant attachment or a anxious attachment. All of these things are linked to nervous system responses that come from childhood upbringing and how we respond to certain stress, because it's stressful dealing with something that's not your energy. That's the whole point. You know what I'm saying? Any real relationship is going to take you through phases of deep uncomfortability. And it's about, of course, you have to have the discernment to know what's positive and what's negative from that. But again, all real relationships are going to push you through some form of change. And part of that change is figuring out how to work and manage with each other's energy. Remember, too, Venus is about, Venus at its home, which is what we're about to get into, is Libra, which is all about balance. So even in the nature of its most excited point, at its lowest point, still there has to be work involved to take it kind of to that next level, to make love at its understand love at its best. You know what I'm saying? So don't just think, okay, you can live in the emotional fantasy. No, there's going to be time. There's going to eventually be a time in which that fantasy has to deal with the reality. It has to come back to earth. And of course, there's some people who might have relationships where it seems like it's always in the honeymoon phase, but still, that's an effort to be able to consistently do that. There needs to be, a person has to work on that. It might not feel like work, but that's the equivalent of, sometimes like when people got their dream career, and their career is like something that they feel like, oh, I love to do this, so it's not even really work. But if that person didn't have that appreciation for what they do, if they didn't really love what they do, then it would be considered work. You know what I'm saying? So everybody kind of has to find their medium or their balance when it comes to uh dealing with the day-to-day interactions. You know what I'm saying? Because everybody, even in the most perfect, seemingly perfect relationships, there's going to be moments of tension, moments of having to work and deal with maybe uncomfortable situations, or kind of figure out, how do we manage this? How can we improve upon this? Some more than others, some less frequently, some more frequently, but regardless, everything requires some form of work. So again, this also gives you an idea that to look at love and approach it as if I don't got to work for this, or I shouldn't have to put effort here, then you're already misunderstanding the concept of Venus. And this is why you're probably dealing with a bunch of, either you're alone or you're dealing with a bunch of situations that, half baked relationships, basically getting into something, getting involved, and then basically it stays as a situationship. It might not progress to nothing real or substantial. So, again, instead of getting frustrated at others, you might have to look at yourself. What's your concept of love? Because also understand the natures of these two energies. Your Pisces is a very childlike energy, if you really think about it. The 12th house, even though it's the last zodiac sign and the most, you might consider it mature, but it's like the nature of Pisces is kind of more so you got to look at it kind of somewhat on reverse. Like Pisces is kind of like more so on the child end in a sense, you know what I'm saying? Because to go with a fantasy, to go with the imagination, it's like how, old people, how they say, like the older you get, you kind of revert back to a child. So it's like, even though it's at the end of the zodiac sign, in some ways, it's kind of at that point of elderly, to the point where it becomes more about the fantasy than it does about the responsibility. So you got to consider that too. Is like, if you want a mature relationship, or a relationship to develop, or anything that you love, appreciate, and value, because let's take it outside of relationship. Let's talk about your craft, something that something you love to do. To be in your own world and create is great, but if you want your work and your craft to develop, you're going to have to put work into it. You're going to have to figure out ways that you can, facilitate it, get it in front of others and things like that. But part of it is, you have to work on it, regardless. And that's Virgo type energy. So that just gives you an idea. If you love, appreciate, or value something, if you value it, you should be willing to work on it or work for it. You know what I'm saying? And again, the it's like, kind of think about you making a song or something like that, or let's say you paint, you do art. It's like when you have the imagination of that art piece, that's Pisces. The imagination of how cool it would be to do what's in your mind, but to actually do it and execute it is the Virgo energy. So you can't, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, you can think of romance all you want and honeymoon phase and, oh, I wish somebody would just X, Y, and Z for me, and I wish this, but come to reality. You have to put yourself in a position to even receive that. You have to, whether it's put in effort to put yourself out there, or put in effort to, whether it be communicate, say communicate and share ideas and work. And like, there's work involved to make that romance real. And people get stuck in the fantasy land and don't understand that you also have to be present and engage to get what you want. How they say closed mouths don't get fed. It's like, what I'm saying, clean hands don't get paid. You know what I'm saying? That's the new shit. That's my shit. Clean hands don't get paid. So you gotta do the dirty work. You gotta put your hands in the dirt and make room for that seed to be planted. You know what I'm saying? If you want something, you gotta speak up and get it. You know what I'm saying? And even if it's difficult, a lot of times you might, again, try to find a shortcut, but you'll always find that even in the shortcut, you end up going a longer route for it. AKA, let's say you're not getting what you want. Instead of kind of confronting that and dealing with it, you might find some kind of a roundabout way, like people who get engaged in just kind of go about relationships in a very childish way. Like, you're not getting what you want here, so instead of confronting your partner and going through that 1-2, you try to go outside a relationship, or you try to, do some kind of, backdoor type energy. And guess what? You either manifest somebody who just like what you tried to leave in a different way, or you end up stabbing yourself or stinging yourself in a degree of dealing with some kind of, fallout, or a person finesse you. You know what I'm saying? It's how, like I said before, what you put out, you get back, and especially when it comes to things like Venus, because what you don't understand is Venus at its home is literally the scales and balance and senses of karma, not pop culture karma, but it's a way in which things must balance. If what's ever on your mind, you're gonna see manifest. Same thing in the concept of, if you look for negativity, you're gonna find it. And see, this is also the part of Virgo fallen, Venus and Virgo, where you also, again, there's healthy criticism, but then there's criticism that comes from a place of, like, to the point of, uh I wish I had a better word, but like complaining or something like that. It's like there's criticism that can be constructive, but then there's, over criticism, which can start to become, what you might consider complaining or nagging, to the point of, you're not actually incorporating the other aspect, which is appreciation to the highest degree, where you're taking time to also acknowledge, uh, you know, the beauty of things, as far as like Venus and Pisces, where it's like, even though it might not be perfect, we can still imagine or connect on what is, either the potential of something, or what is emotionally connected to as a common, like, how like Pisces will share a vibe with you. So it's like that kind of vibe, where it's like, yeah, it might not be perfect, but at least we vibing on this, or at least we able to flow and just connect with the fact that we, saying we together on something. But so let's get into Libra. Venus and Libra, this is its external home. So this is home, but the external form of home. So this is being at home during the daytime. So think of it like that. So what do you do during in your home during the daytime? This is you expressing things, you know what I'm saying, maybe kicking back, relaxing, but for the most part, it might be you just uh let's get into it. It's love as duty or responsibility. This is the structure or system of exchange for value, right? This is harmony and compatibility, and this is compromise and balance of ego, right? So let's talk about let's talk about first love as duty or responsibility. So when we look at the nature of Libra energy, what's exalted in Libra, right? Oh, matter of fact, before I get there, let me go back to Pisces exaltation, right? So if we look at the nature of Pisces, the ruling planet of Pisces is Jupiter, right? So Venus at its highest point is incorporating energies of Jupiter, experiences, shared experiences, going through different things. You know, I think there's even a saying like when it comes to different things like relationships specifically, it's about making memories. You know, make as many memories as you can, create and curate experiences both for one another. You know what I'm saying? It's part of that that keeps that love kind of vibrant and things like that, keeps that love alive. So, you know, as we're going along these different signs, what I'm really doing is to understand Venus as a planet. I'm looking at each position, and then from that position, we're going to talk about what that energy encompasses. That gives us an idea of what Venus is at its that at that position. If y'all follow what I'm saying, because I know I'm the way I'm talking right now, I might be talking too fast. I might be, you know what I'm saying, but hopefully y'all following along with what I'm saying. So if you think of love um, at its highest position, it's Jupiterian type energy, right? Jupiterian in the sense of expansion. You know, we should be learning from each other. We should be experiencing things together, you know, as far as experience. And see, experiences doesn't always mean physical. It's about whether it's like we actually going on different, going through different things together, but experiencing together is also just, you know, one thing about Pisces energy you got to understand, like what makes Pisces close to somebody is Jupiter on an internal sense of when we go through something, we could look at each other and we both like you seen that and we can kind of confirm and laugh that we both experience the same thing. And we might feel about it differently, but for the most part, it's like a it's hard to explain. If you got Pisces energy, you know what I mean. But it's like it's a comfort in knowing that somebody had a similar emotional experience than you, so y'all can connect on that. So it's kind of like y'all in a crowded area, and let's say something weird goes on in the corner, right? Nobody else seen it, but you and that other person, and y'all can look at each other and be like, "What was that?" That's kind of what I mean. So it's kind of like that aspect of Jupiter, right? So you got to think about that with your partner. That's why in the best types of relationships is you and that other person against the world. So y'all go through many different experiences, but y'all always are together in the sense of being able to look at each other and say, "Damn, you seen that? What was that about?" And it's kind of like a always got your back type of energy. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, and then when we go to Virgo in Venus and Virgo, right? Virgo is ruled by Mercury. So so Venus when it's at its low point, but not even low point, just at its point where it needs the most work, or when you're going to work with Venus, Mercury. So, like I was saying before, communication, because the work of a relationship is dealing with two different individuals. And as an individual, what's in my mind is impossible for you to know until I create a bridge through communication and practicality for you to be able to connect on. So, connection can't be had. That's why they say communication is key, because communication is the foundation of the work involved to establish a healthy relationship. Whereas, the fun part of love, in a sense, right? The exalted Piscean, again, it's that energy of what's understood don't need to be said. So again, us being able to shoot a look at each other and be like, damn, I already feel you. I'm connected to you. So that look, I already know what that means. You know what I'm saying? And that's the part of love in which you feel as though a person know you better than you know yourself. They could just shoot you a look and you already know what they're saying. Or, those silent moments where we could be together connected, not have to say anything to already know how each other feel. And that's where, again, when you and think about love in general in your own life, when you're when you're the most stressed about a relationship or love is when you don't feel connected in that sense of that Pisces energy, when you don't feel like y'all on the same page emotionally, where you feel like they don't understand you, or you feel like there's something blocking connection or things like that. Um, and then Virgo again, but ironically, like I was saying before, Venus and Virgo, the fall of love is really the saving grace, because through communication, connection can be reestablished. And this is where the balance comes in, where you can't just look at it like, oh, let's only be in the exalted version of love. No, we're gonna have, when we're going through it, we're gonna have to do what the fallen position is doing too, in order to gain comfort and stability. Now, when you're looking at Venus in your individual life and where you got it, when you have Venus in one of these areas, one of these key areas, you have to kind of consider that, your approach to love is heavy on that. So there's times in which you might have to do other aspects to balance it out, right? Whether it's you got Venus and Pisces, you might go overboard, but you have the capacity to kind of provide the vibe of high Venus type energy. So you can be the provider of that energy, but every now and then you might have to jump into your opposite just to balance things out, because people will take advantage of you, X, Y, and Z. If you Venus and Virgo, again, you are the driving force of what it takes to work on a relationship. But sometimes you're gonna have to let lighten that up and be more open to what the other energy in Pisces could bring, aka being cool with the vibe, and being able to contribute to the vibe in a positive type way without always, what I'm saying. But because again, you're not confined to whatever zodiac sign you got. It's just what you're most comfortable with. It's what you're biased towards. It's what your most your nature resonated with the most to make you feel more comfortable. So that's like how it kind of play out. It's like that's just what you prefer. So you know what I'm saying. But at the same time, it's not about you should. I don't know. It's difficult sometimes, because in life it's not all about being comfortable all the time. However, we all deserve a piece of comfort. So it's not about abandoning your energy, but it's about understanding the context and what's necessary for the best outcome regarding what you want. You know what I'm saying? That's why everybody kind of got to know what they want. And Venus deals with wants too. So, Venus and Virgo, your wants might be very specific and very rigid. So you might have to make them more mutable and things like that. And then make them more, say you might have to just check that. Same thing with Venus in Pisces. Your wants might be like too fantasy, like it's unrealistic. And you might have to calm that down at times. You know what I'm saying? But I just wanted to get that in to understand, like when we look at these different signs and positions, understand that sign for what it is. Jupiterian, for Pisces, and then Mercury for Virgo. Now let's talk about Libra external home, like I said before. So love as duty or responsibility. So this is Libra is where Venus is home at. So this is the externalization of love, appreciation, value, support, balance, and things like that. So you're the initiator of balance. You're coming at things with that cardinal type energy. So in a lot of ways, this is what love looks like when it's comfortable, right? Love as a duty or responsibility. So Libra, Saturn is exalted there. So a lot of people overlook that. And this is why I said in the beginning, a lot of times people associate love with just the moon. But the moon is, yeah, we're going to get to that. But the moon deals with comfort and what feels good, right? What feels like, you know, secure and things like that. But the other aspect of that is Saturn, to get to that comfort internally, which is Taurus, we have to do the work, aka love as a duty and responsibility. We have to create the structure in the system for love to operate. That's the external home. So that's where love is comfortable, but at the same time, it's also where love has to take care of the responsibilities. So, love as a duty and responsibility. This is like where we look at concepts like commitment, and commitment's influence on love and appreciation and value as well. Because if you're not committed to what you value, right, you're not going to show up in the ways that you're needed to show up. If you're not committed or dedicated to the degree of being able to deal with obstacles and look at things as a matter of building, aka whoever you're relating to or what person, place, or thing it is, you're not looking at the structure of it, or it doesn't contribute to your reality, aka it like basically being in some kind of partnership where there's nothing being worked towards, there's nothing being a common ground for us to build, then you kind of can start to see that, oh, this might not work because the roles and responsibilities, and also that's another key thing too, roles and responsibilities, whether it's gender roles or whatever, there has to be clear defined roles on what you do and what your partner does. You know what I'm saying? And again, that's easier said than done because sometimes and again, another Saturnian aspect, it takes time to define those roles sometimes. Sometimes it takes time to figure out who's good at what and who's willing to take that responsibility to do X, Y, and Z. But again, going back to, we can see again, Venus in Virgo, the work involved, this is where that work actually makes sense. This is where that work has a purpose because if you're not committed to doing the work, you're not going to be willing to step up to that responsibility to create balance and harmony within that partnership. And the key aspect, Libra home or Venus in Libra, the main aspect of love, when we look at the nature of what makes love work or what makes love love, and what makes appreciation what it is, what makes value what it is, what makes support what it is, to be supportive as a partner. It's a matter of being able to initiate your position in a role. And again, you don't have to follow society's version of gender roles. This is literally for you and your whatever you're relating to come up with defined roles. And both parties have to be willing to kind of step up in what they're good at and allow that to be part of the system. And even if let's say, because you're not always going to be wanting to do the same, you might not always want to do the same thing all the time, you might not always be 100%. So there also has to be an agreement, right? And this is kind of the contractual aspect of Libra when you want to say, oh, marriage and a contract and things like that. Even though, again, society and external, that was just created for whatever reasons again they got, but it comes from somewhere. There has to be some kind of contractual agreement, whether it is specifically internally, because if you sign something externally but y'all don't have an internal agreement, you just got married for the fuck of it, then you're not going to even respond to these things the right way. There needs to be an internal contract or an agreement between who's going to do what, and then also an agreement to acknowledge when another person might not have the energy to do certain things and be willing to step up and create harmony in that point. You know what I'm saying? But that still has to be balanced out. And a lot of times, relationships run into difficulty because, again, a lack of understanding or a lack of understanding of when that's time to do that. And also a lack of, say, because sometimes, again, even like rhetoric nowadays, like the 50-50 thing, where people might look at it like 50-50, but you got to look at it as energy as well. What are you doing to also just participate and bring balance? Because, even if we are talking money wise, today, I mean, everybody broke kind of low key today, what I'm saying? The people with money is like, still, there has to be something another individual is bringing to balance things out. And it goes beyond money and things like that. But it's like, you know, there has to be those conversations based upon agreement on how do we, how do we manage this system, and what kind of system do we have, what are we trying to produce, what are we working and trying to establish as reality, and how can we play the roles necessary to produce that result, you know and one thing too to keep in mind, Libra energy. So we understand during Libra season, in Libra the sun falls. So in order for a relationship to even work, or for love to be effective, right, in a certain comfort home way, in order for love to be effective, or Venus to be effective, the ego has to fall. And that's the part that gets in the way as well. If you got too much ego, two things can happen: the Aries aspect of it's all on me. So you get a person doing too much, or the separation, the independence, hyper independence. And a lot of times, like I said before about attachment styles, a lot of this comes from a person's upbringing and what they look at as what's normal. Or let's say you walking around with a Venus and Aries and things like that, you might have more so a tendency to be hyper independent, or some kind of aspect of I got to do it all myself, or based just upon your upbringing, you was put in situations where you was forced to do a lot of things on your own. So by default, you might take on more responsibility than necessary, or you might retract and separate yourself at times in which you're supposed to be engaging and being more vulnerable, aka the sun falling in Libra. So for love to even work, there has to be an acknowledgement of your ego and being able to kind of put that in its place when it's time to do what's necessary for harmony, connection, relating, and balance. Because again, you and your ego, you might not want to do the dishes, but it's like, if you really think about it, if you're trying to be in a union, or you're trying to support or run a household in a system, then you have to be able to step up. Again, even the nature of Saturn and the sun, right? It's like, it's almost like, think about it's like almost like an energy of being too prideful to take responsibility for the whole the whole operation. You know what I'm saying? If you too much in your ego, you know what I'm saying, it'll be that type of thing. You said, are you in a healthy relationship? Yeah, I am. You know what I'm saying? That's, I'm speaking from experience. You know what I'm saying? Like, I come from a healthy relationship. I'm in one. It is what it is. You know what I'm saying? And again, healthy doesn't always mean things is always rainbows and butterflies, but you know what I'm saying? It's still considered healthy. Like, healthy relationships go through conflict and things like that. So, when it comes to these different interactions, that's what you got to keep in mind. The ego has to fall on some degree. Now, what I'm saying is not to disregard your individuality, not to disregard your ego, not to be allowing yourself to be taken advantage of. But again, even in the most times of conflict, there has to be an acknowledgement of, we still gotta run this household, or we still together within this contract. And that's kind of what Saturn provides as a baseline consistency or structure, you know what I'm saying, that allows both individuals, even if they are uh, in conflict, again, on two sides of the house, but still be able to come together to make sure we manage what's necessary for whatever responsibilities we share, whether that be children, whether that be bills, whether that be anything. You know what I'm saying? Again, we might not agree all the time, but we can agree to disagree and keep it moving, keep it functioning. You know what I'm saying? In order for that system to go, because Venus at its point of home comfort and its most stable point is, Venus being home in Libra energy, the exaltation of Saturn, and that aspect of that helps you get a grasp of, oh, okay, for love to even be comfortable, there needs to be a emphasis on structure and what we're trying to build, and a commitment or dedication towards a common goal, or the what we're building as a structure, if that makes sense. Now, and again, the system, right? Saturn is all about systems. So Venus at its home point, again, it's the structure system of exchange of value. So this is even where, again, love languages, a person might have a different love language than their spouse or things like that, but it's about figuring out the system of exchange. So again, getting out of your ego to be able to say, okay, I know their love language is this, so let me do things that'll satisfy their love language for the sake of the system, the exchange of value, right? The exchange of support. There's times where you're going to need more support as, what, as an individual, and there's times where they're going to need some support. And so, and again, these things are what needs to be felt out throughout the relationship and stuff. You're not always going to get these things perfect, but this is just giving you a concept of Venus. So if you're in a relationship, you can understand these different modes and these different processes as you're going through them, right? So you can understand, okay, if I'm going through this, boom, I might need to do more of this, or vice versa. I'm not getting enough of this. So you can make that decision on your own as to whether or not you need to. And again, going back to Virgo, Venus and Virgo, when it's falling, you might need to do more work, aka communicate through Mercury, to get more understanding on how the system should work, aka Virgo energy improving upon the system, right? Might not be fun, but very necessary and things like that. You said, I'm struggling now with love. How do you deal with conflict in your relationship? So when it comes to conflict, uh yeah, so it kind of depends. Well, the main thing is this, right? Because it's a lot of nuances that kind of make it, say, I can't just give blanket advice because I don't know the details. But I'll say this, like when you're dealing with conflict, the best thing you could probably do is just, it's a matter of communication, like kind of hearing what the other person has to say, and allow and see, again, depending on what kind of conflict it is and what y'all going back and forth about. The thing is, most people are in search of connection and safety. So depending on whether you're a female or you're a man, or you got masculine energy and they got feminine energy, whatever y'all dynamic is, of course, women cling more so to needing safety and connection. Um, but it's like, I don't even want to say it like that, because it's like we all as individuals are in search of safety and connection. So it's a matter of trying to do the best to understand where the other person is coming from, and that's way easier said than done. Because in moments of intense conflict, again, nobody really wants to be the one who's understanding, and you might even feel like you always doing the understanding. But at the end of the day, if you really want to be with somebody and you really trying to make things work, you have to understand that at the core of it, we have to communicate until we understand what the other person feels the best we can, and then listen and respond, not react. So we have to also learn how to respond in a way that allows for connection to be rebuilt. So depending on what the conflict is, and you have to really get deep on what the conflict is, because it might on the surface be something very surface level. It might be something like, oh, you didn't do the dishes, or you didn't take out the trash, but deep down inside, both individuals are, basically, you got to look at it like both individuals were children once who needed something that their parent might not have been able to provide them. So they grew up with certain defense mechanisms and ways of dealing with stress and anxiety. So as they grow up, they have certain things that they have is almost like internal rules that are built upon their insecurities. So the better you can start to understand your insecurities and then inquire about their insecurities, the more y'all can develop that sense of safety that'll allow both of y'all to be vulnerable enough to express what's really going on. And as you do that, then you can have the real conversations that need to happen. And if it's a relationship that's actually going in that proper direction, like you're dealing with somebody who's mature and self-aware enough to kind of go that distance with you, then that's where you kind of get the groundwork of a healthy relationship and establishing that. You know what I'm saying? But again, everybody has biases and attachments to certain uh, kind of response systems. So you kind of have to fight through that a little bit. But conflict, it doesn't have to be bad. Conflict can be, honestly, conflict is one of the best things. And it's, of course, like, uh, when I say that, I'm like, not all conflict, like, physical abuse and going too far, mental abuse and emotional abuse. Of course, those things are not okay. But conflict in terms of, you got to think it's two different individuals' minds trying to share or become one. So, conflict is inevitable because you come from a space and they come from a space, and y'all relations between one another, y'all alignment with each other might need adjustment in order to be on the same page. And sometimes even with the seasons, different people go through different growth processes at different times and stuff. So you just kind of have to be open and willing to had that conversation, and hopefully you with an individual who's also doing their own shadow work and able to kind of meet themselves and know themselves to a degree to be able to give you a fair opportunity, or give the relationship, I should say, a fair opportunity to grow, for y'all to grow together and things like that. So how but if you're just asking how to deal with conflict in relationships, it's a matter of having to observe yourself so that you can get clarity on where you coming from and why you feel the way you feel, and then being also open and willing to ask questions, and then also understand and listen to what they feel and where they come from. And again, even if y'all agree to disagree, by understanding each other, y'all create that space of safety and the opportunity for connection. So that's what I would say. Um but yeah, so getting back to Libra externally. So, love as a duty or responsibility. We talked about the system of exchange for value and support. So, even in the sense of whatever you love and appreciate, value, you want to exchange that and balance that. There's times where you're going to need support, whether it's emotional or mental support and things like that, but you still have to be willing to communicate about that. Extend yourself, because again, people can't read minds. So when you need help, you need to be able to open up and explain that, or at least bring attention to that in some kind of way. Of course, we all want somebody who can pick up on the signal. And but again, that's part of you thinking love is some kind of fantasy, again, in this exalted space. But love at its most home basis and what needs to be the common ground, it needs to be something where you're able to initiate conversations, or at least um, work towards developing a system of exchange. So coming up with different things that signal to the other partner that, hey, I need support here. You know what I'm saying? And the most clear way to do that is by kind of low key communicating. Now, and like last but not least, when I was talking about uh Venus and Libra, harmony and compatibility, right? So harmony and compatibility, to harmonize with another individual. Sometimes you're gonna have to again, if you say simple things like, and this is easier said than done, but this is something that through practice and just awareness you could develop better skills to be able to do, right? So let's give an example of, you know, again, your let's say your wife has been home all day cooking, cleaning, or she just been home all day with children, right? So when you get home from work as a man, right, you're the house is a mess and things like that. Assessing what's necessary to be able to engage in to create harmony, right? So it's like that requires a certain level of being able to balance out your ego to be like, okay, assessing the situation, what needs taken care of to create balance. Now you might be in your own head like, well, shit, I came from work and I'm tired and I'm not, ain't no dinner here, ain't no this, but when you kind of understand the type of relationships that actually work is when a person is able to assess a situation and then insert themselves in a way that provides value, but also provides some form of uh, harmony. You know what I'm saying? If you want a peaceful evening, you might have to jump in and do something to create that harmony. You know, like when we think of, like, I like to talk about cancer a lot of times. When it's cancer season, I'm like, look, cancer is a cardinal energy. So that means to create you have to create comfort. So you can't just expect comfort to be given to you. You have to initiate it. You have to find things that's going to make you comfortable, or you know, insert comfort in the places that might make you uncomfortable. So it's the same thing, similar with harmony. And I'm just using that as an example. Might not be the best example. It might not be even applicable. You might be a female watching this, and you know, even on the female side, an example of that is, you know, say you see your man had a hard day at work or something like that. Let's say, you know, you got a little bit of extra energy and things like that. You can maybe do something that can relieve his stress or something like that. But my point is, when it comes to harmony, again, it's associated with Libra, and that's a cardinal energy. So when it comes to kind of operating and doing something successful, when it comes to love, appreciation, value, and support, you should look to initiate harmony. You should look to engage or insert yourself in a way that can create harmony in a situation. So the situation itself might just be what it is, and there might not be no signals from the other person to step in and do certain things. But again, if you want to build on that relationship, you want to build on that connection, initiating harmony, and that looks like you just doing something nice for another individual. And again, outside of relationships, initiating support. You see somebody you know who's been working their ass off to make, you know, their art and do whatever they do, their business. Hey, you know what? I'm gonna initiate harmony by, you know, extending myself to maybe share their work, or maybe donate what I can, or maybe just give them a kind word of praise and be like, yo, man, good shit. And same thing, even with praise, communication and things like that. Sometimes people just need to hear that you appreciate what they do. Sometimes people just need to hear that you are there in support and things like that, even if things are difficult, especially when things are difficult. But again, by the time love, you know, really understand that love at its home point, like I said before, Libra is exalted Saturn. Saturn takes time, it takes dedication, it takes commitment, it takes a lot of you know, work, but it's different kind of work than Virgo. It's like work that's about maintaining, managing, and establishing, you know what I'm saying, execution, you know, things like that. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind overall when we deal with Venus, love as a concept and a nature, the nature of love. Now, yeah. So let's get into the internal part of of Venus, right? Venus, when it's home internally, this is Taurus. This is love as home or security and comfort, aka the fact that in Taurus the moon is exalted. So on the external end, and when we're looking at like the external aspect of home, this is like what needs to be initiated. But when we look at the internal form of Venus home, this is what what we're working towards to establish as, like, it's almost like, if you think about it, right, it's like you clean your house to be able to enjoy the comfort of a clean home. It's like, so external home looks like you may be doing things in the house, aka initiating harmony, aka initiating your role and responsibility, doing what you can, duties around the house, duties just in general. Because duties could even be like taking individuals out on dates. You know what I'm saying? Taking them on a date and doing the thing that makes that system work, where the other person feels appreciated and you feel appreciated, aka the exchange of value. You know what I'm saying? But when you're talking about what's being created or what we're working towards to create as an energy in the home, or what we want to experience in the home, is in the home of y'all love relationship, y'all love scenario, is we're trying to work towards security, comfort, and safety. So safety in oneself is a big part too. You know what I'm saying? Because again, I'm talking a lot about external relationships, but when it comes to I'm talking a lot about external relationships, but when it comes to, before you can even attract a stable relationship or a healthy relationship, or even, it's like, before you can even attract a stable relationship or a healthy one, you first have to have safety within oneself. You have to know how to self-regulate. You have to know, and that self-regulation is also linked to self-esteem and your own personal value. So, when we look at Taurus energy, what does Taurus represent? Uh, it's what you have to offer to the world. So it's your sense of self value and things like that. You said dates matter. I'm an Aquarius. Yeah, real. Yeah. All, yeah, dates are important. You know what I'm saying? But, uh, talking about Taurus internally, and again, like, that gives you a good example of, like, again, the external part. Both individuals got to figure out how to initiate things that make the other feel valued. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes that falls based upon the other responsibilities you got in the world and things like that. But again, you still have to make an effort to figure out how you could do that. And again, yeah, that's some real shit. That's just some real shit. It's just what it is. Um, but Taurus internally, love as home or security, like I said before, safety in oneself. So there's an aspect too in this relating, right? That is also an internal responsibility to have a healthy sense of self-esteem, to stabilize oneself, to know how to regulate one's own feelings and emotions and their own value. If you don't value yourself, you're gonna do a poor job probably at these other aspects of Venus and love, because you're gonna sell yourself short, aka you're not gonna speak up when it's time for you to get what you need in order to feel comfortable. You're not gonna also be willing or feel the basically, like, the confidence to set boundaries that you need to set, and to, again, communication and all these other things kind of fall short if your own self-esteem isn't right. And also, even on the other end of being too much of a partner, you could be too demanding because you don't know how to make yourself feel the things you want to feel. So you could be a type of person who becomes draining because you don't have a healthy sense of self, or becomes, clingy to the degree of, kind of just, how that type of energy, where it's like you gotta be like, is this even a realistic demand that you're making? So sometimes a low self-esteem individual can start to expect to be given certain things, to give them self-esteem, when it's like some of these things are your responsibility on your own as an individual. So you can't always put that on another person's shoulders to make you feel how you want to feel. Sometimes you got to be able to retract and make yourself feel stable, make yourself feel good on your own. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of like a kind of a responsibility everyone has on their own. Because if you always depending on somebody else to provide you a good vibe, well, what are you providing? At certain points, you're going to be the person who's always draining individuals and stuff like that. So, again, love can only work if you have a healthy sense of self-esteem. You know what I'm saying? But if you're in a partnership too, you have to have also the self-esteem to speak up and get what you want out of that partnership, aka hey, I deserve this. Hey, saying that I deserve this too. I deserve that, and be able to feel that and establish that, as well as on the other end, the external part, Venus and Libra, also being able to initiate and create and what is it, externalize your value. So pay attention how like Libra externally, right, or Venus externally, Venus and Libra, the outward, the masculine side of Venus being home is all about being able to initiate harmony by basically externalizing its value. But it can't externalize what it don't feel within. So if you lack self-value, you're not even going to have enough to externalize. If you lack self-value, aka Venus internally, when it's home, aka Venus in Taurus, if you don't have no real good self-esteem or no self-value, you're gonna fall short when it comes to being able to externalize it. So you might not, again, you might be demanding a bunch of things. You want to be catered to, you want to be taken care of, but you also got to be acknowledging like how much do you initiate that as well? How much do you offer those things as well? Because you could just be take, and not actually be giving or exchanging anything of value, but you just, again, based upon maybe your lack of self-esteem or your lack of whatever, you feel like you deserve more than what you might really do. You know what I'm saying? Not to say you're not valuable, but again, in that context of that relationship or in that context of whatever partnership you're in, because this same thing could be correlated to business. Same thing could be correlated to whatever goal you have in life, whether you want to be, again, you do art and something like that, and you think you deserve all the praise in the world, but the art that you produce, you're so unsure about it. You lack so much confidence about it, or you don't have enough self-esteem to actually put it out and market it the way you're supposed to, and connect the way you're supposed to with it. It falls short, it falls flat, and then you get angry at the world when it's not the world's fault, it's your fault. You know what I'm saying? In the sense of you need to establish more self-esteem. One thing about Taurus energy, it is the internal Venus. So sometimes even how like Taurus energy expresses love and things like that, it might expresses love. The way Taurus might express love is through practical means. And at the same time, sometimes people need the externalized form of it, aka it verbalized and things like that too. So, but that's kind of getting into just Taurus energy in general. But sometimes that's important though, because Taurus internally, or Venus internally, aka Venus and Taurus, represents consistency and foundation. And these are the groundworks of what creates and establishes comfort and safety. So, aka loyalty and things like that, being able to be consistent, and that consistency lay the groundwork for a foundation is essential in order for love to thrive and things like that. He said, "Is going to sleep mad at your partner that bad?" Um, I mean, I think that when you think about it, right, in conflict or when you're in an argument with your partner, you got to kind of consider what the thoughts and feelings on your mind is and how they contribute to the union and the relationship and the connection. Because if you harbor a lot of negative feelings and thoughts about your partner, especially when y'all in conflict, and let's say you go to bed with that on your mind, in a lot of ways, what's on your mind ends up becoming what motivates you to act and behave. It's like spiritually, the space you in mentally is what you're going to start to attract more of. So if you make it a habit of harboring negative thoughts and feelings about your partner, you're going to start to only see the negative things about them. And you're going to you might forget what is good about them and what makes them them and what makes them an individual. Because things that we don't like sometimes, yeah, they might piss us off, they might frustrate us, but at a certain point, if you harbor too much of that, that becomes what you think they are. And when you go back to have conversations and stuff like that, you might start to develop that perception of them. And it might not seem like a bad thing on the surface, because you might think, well, I'm just thinking about this because they made me mad and this, but you don't realize that when it comes to how y'all energies mesh together, like people pick up on that energy, you know what I'm saying? And it can, and not always, and sometimes, again, we all gonna go through times where we don't like the person, like, what I'm saying. And when I say don't like, I just mean we're frustrated with the person. But it's like, I think there's, at some point before you go to bed, even if y'all don't resolve the conflict, at least before you put your head on that pillow, sit with yourself and kind of release some of those heavy negative thoughts and feelings. You know what I'm saying? If you mad, again, people, sometimes people frustrate you, and sometimes you can't get the end of the argument before you go to bed and things like that. Sometimes you can't get to the point of it and solve it all in one evening. You know what I'm saying? So just learn how to, in your own self, table certain negative thoughts, and set them on a shelf and something like that, and then go to bed with clarity on your mind. At least balance out some of the more negative thoughts with something that is still like, that's still my personal, still my partner. This motherfucker making me mad, but I still appreciate them for who they are. And in the morning I'll figure it out. You know what I'm saying? So when you wake up, you're not waking up with heavy thoughts on your mind. And again, it's like, you know, it's kind of like magic, you know what I'm saying, when you really think about this. Because spiritually, it's just where your mind goes, it's like your body tends to follow. So it's like you kind of just got to look at it like, hey, you know what I'm saying? You got to look at it like you have to kind of take accountability and self responsibility for where your mind is at and how it contributes to the relationship as a whole too. You know what I'm saying? Because I think that sometimes people get into a rut or a habit of thinking negatively about their partner, but it's really like anybody that makes you mad. But you also have to have a certain level of self control to be able to control your mind and remind yourself that is still my partner. That's still somebody I value. That's still somebody I want to keep around me. So the more and more I harbor negative feelings, the more and more it's going to contribute to the overall well-being of the relationship and things like that. Because you start thinking like that and you make it a habit to keep going to bed with those heavy thoughts in your mind, especially if you're not communicating these things. What's going to happen is eventually you're going to develop certain thought processes that make you reject them, and they're going to feel that too. And so what you put out is what you get back. So they're going to start to come up with their own thoughts and feelings that's also opposing you. So there's like a dynamic where you might want to point the finger and say, "Well, you're ruining this," or I'm ruining this." But what's happening is y'all just kind of creating this negative cycle, especially if y'all still connected and y'all planning to stay together. It's like you planning to stay together. If you're not finna leave, then don't be harboring all kinds of negative feelings, because at the end of the day, you're gonna be that's just gonna make it harder to get back to connection and things like that. Think about it as like a cup of water, right? And every time you harbor negative feelings, it's like you throwing dirt in the water. So it's gonna poison the water. So when y'all both go to sip, you can be like, what's this? Ugh. And that's what even people might develop as when they call like the ick and shit like that. They be like, oh, I got the ick or something like that. And it's like and that's kind of a different concept, but it's the same, it's similar uh in the same frequency. It's like, again, y'all a relationship is just, think of it like a cup, and y'all need to figure out ways to fulfill that cup with things that provide nutrients and provide well-being, so that when y'all both take a sip, y'all feel refreshed and y'all feel connected and willing to be there. But if you keep throwing dirt in that water and you not actually communicating, you just going to bed with this. Like, I don't think the whole, when people say never go to bed mad and angry, I think that is dramatic. I think, I mean, I feel it. You know what I'm saying? I feel it. That's a great concept, and for who it works for, that's great. But the reality is sometimes y'all will not get through the end of an argument at one night. So you as an individual just have to learn how to table certain things mentally, so that you don't keep throwing dirt in that water. You know what I'm saying? It's more so about what thoughts and feelings are you harboring, and having a healthy release system to not hold. Because what happen is you'll start to hold certain things against each other, and that's when things get complicated. That's when things become toxic. You know, dirt and water, toxicity. You know what I'm saying? You're throwing something that water that's kind of making that water contaminated and stuff like that. So, and matter of fact, that's a good topic, because, well, actually, that's part of when we get to the Scorpio side of Venus, that applies to that, because that's an important thing to keep in mind. Um, but before we get into that, like I said, last thing I'm gonna say about Venus and Taurus and Venus internally is consistency and foundation, aka what we can consider loyalty and commitment, dedication. Again, same similar thing to how Saturn is exalted, but in Taurus, the moon is exalted. So to establish safety and connection on the deepest level, there needs to be a consistency, a willingness to stabilize. You know what I'm saying? If you're this is who you want to be with, stabilize and have a consistent level that can create a foundation for love to exist. And again, beyond love, it's like for love to exist in a healthy way, there needs to be a foundation for safety to be able to exist and things like that. So that's what Venus and Taurus, or Venus in the position of Taurus, aka Venus home, but internally, is all about. And I like to look at the two homes of a planet as the day and the night. Ironically, we talking about going to bed. So at night, you know what I'm saying, the night side of Venus when it's home, aka Taurus, it's all about, at the end of the day, we are looking to protect our level of our connection. We're looking to protect our safety. And this is why everybody is on a deep level looking for safety and connection. You know what I'm saying? So people, that's what makes people kind of go to the extreme. This is what makes people feel like they gotta avoid things, or gotta run from things, or gotta destroy things, go to war with certain things, because everybody in some way is in search of that safety and that connection. Now, let's get into the away. So, when Venus is in Aries, is considered away or at work, right? And so this is one of the signs they say that Venus has a hard time in. And the reason is, and so this is opposite to where it's home. So this is like, you know, yeah, Venus at a job, right? And it's the external form of away. So this is love as self-preservation or detachment. Now, I spoke about a little bit about this when I was talking about Libra. Was it Libra? Yeah, Libra. When I was talking about the opposite of Aries, dealing with ego and things like that. Ego is our sense of individuality, but it's also a mask. So that in and of itself helps you understand that, going back to Taurus, in order for the part of love to feel at home internally, there needs to be a level of vulnerability, right? So that vulnerability, a lot of times when Venus is dealing with Aries or is dealing with the kind of a way, there's a sense of self that everybody has to maintain, right? Even in a relationship, both of y'all have to balance being independent, individuals as well. So that independence is healthy to a degree, but it can kind of make it difficult sometimes if both parties don't have a healthy sense of self, or a healthy sense of I forget the word. Saying it's like, it's almost like when y'all going through difficult times or you're away, it's like every now and then, it's like when individuals need space. You know, everybody is going to need space. And as an individual, this is why it's healthy to have your own hobbies, have your own things kind of going on. And when I say own things going on, I don't mean, going crazy and involving yourself in things that are negative to the relationship. I just mean having a identity outside of that other person, so that when it's time to get space, you're not trying to force yourself to be smothered. You don't have tendency to be overbearing to the point you're codependent. You don't give the other person space. You need to also have a healthy sense of self so that you can take and claim your own space. And sometimes that looks like self-preservation. If y'all going through a rocky time, sometimes you might have to gather yourself individually. You know what I'm saying? And that shouldn't threaten the commitment or the stability of the relationship. And healthy ones. Toxic ones, you get a person who's over codependent to the point where they smother the other individual's sense of self, or and a lot of that just comes from them not having this healthy sense of self. So they don't know who they are without their partner. You know what I'm saying? And that becomes extreme. That becomes extreme. That becomes overbearing and things like that. And that's just not healthy overall. Even people who dissolve who they are for the sake of whatever relationship they're in. Also, this is the type of energy that can make an individual, if they don't have a healthy sense of self, they won't know how to detach in a healthy way. You know what I'm saying? They might, and again, there's detaching and being self-preservation mode in a healthy way, but then there's people who might avoid things, who might be hyper independent, and they use detachment and self-preservation as escapism or a protection or defense mechanism against feeling heavy emotions and things like that. So this is the type of person that you might call avoidant, because in heavy conflict and things like that, they run away. In a sense, it looks like they're running away. It looks like they're trying to And a lot of times it's just how they learned to create safety. Because again, like I said before, everybody on some level is trying or in search of that safety and connection. And sometimes when we feel disconnected from who we might be engaging with outside of us, we come up to the concept and say, damn, I'm only safe if I'm taking care of myself. I'm only safe if I got me. So there'll be a over dependence or over going overboard basically on self-preservation and feeling like I got to completely shut down and detach myself because I don't want to deal with these heavy emotions or I don't know how to navigate this conflict and things like that. So people might retreat and go to their space so that they can gather themselves. And again, there's healthy ways to do that, but then there's also negative ways. And this is why Venus in Aries has a difficult time in nature. You know what I'm saying? The nature of Venus, this is opposite to what's supposed to be happening, aka somewhat of a you know, lowering of ego to be able to create space for vulnerability because vulnerability is for connection. Vulnerability equals connection. Ego is like protection, but it's kind of leaning more towards detachment. You know what I'm saying? It's protection, but it's detachment as well. So again, there needs to just be a healthy balance of this because there's times in which yes, both individuals can have space, but if there's also not an initiation of rebuilding or reconnection, then this is where again you get a couple that's kind of stuck in limbo. You know what I'm saying? Where it's just it becomes toxic. It becomes tit for tat because the nature of Aries is you know competition. You know what I'm saying? The sun is exalted here, so it becomes competition. It becomes selfishness. It becomes self-centeredness more so. And so and again, you can't have a healthy relationship if there's too much self-centeredness, aka you can start to that's where everybody goes overboard with saying, oh, you're a narcissist or you're this, you're that. They're really just looking at a person who's prioritizing themselves. But in the nature of a relationship, again, you got to consider there's times in which even if it feels uncomfortable, you have to lower that ego to be vulnerable to keep and maintain connection and things like that. But again, to get to that Saturn part, Saturn falls here. So a lot of times it takes time to get to that level of comfort with another individual. And again, we live in a world that's crazy as fuck. So you don't really know who to trust and stuff like that. But, you know, hopefully you with somebody who is as serious about their own life as you are about your own life. So if y'all both care about your own life, then chances are y'all are engaged in relationships that's actually moving forward and trying to build something real. The whole thing is that you just gotta, you know, if you get scared, don't don't self-sabotage. You know what I'm saying? And that's easier said than done. Most people will self-sabotage if not the whole thing, a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Just a little bit. But again, there's healthy levels of detachment and self-preservation. And yeah, but getting into the details of this too, it's the conflict of independence or identity. So again, in a relationship, y'all two individuals coming together, but there still has to be a sense of self. You still have to develop your own identity too, or maintain your own identity. Now, y'all can become one, but even as becoming one, you still two individuals too. You know what I'm saying? So that's just what it is. And then under that, I got passionate interest and personal insecurities. So again, insecurities a lot of times become the driving force to why people want to detach and why people are, I gotta just do it myself because I feel as though more comfortable if I could just do it myself and stuff like that. Sometimes people get into that mode, especially today's time. Today's time, there seems to be some kind of psyop or encouragement of people being hyper independent, especially like when it comes to women. Women are put in a space where a lot of what they have to do is it feels like they have to be overly masculine or do a lot of masculine type things just to maintain comfort in the world and stuff. And the thing is, like most women are extremely uncomfortable, just in general, feel extremely unsafe. You know what I'm saying? But even beyond that, insecurities, a lot of men are walking around as walking insecurities as well. I think everybody in general is just very unsafe and very, and when I say unsafe, they feel unsafe. Not that they are unsafe, but again, that phrase that hurt people is like saying, everybody's coming from maybe traumatized upbringings. Even the most healthy upbringing, sometimes people get into other relationships that make them insecure in other ways, or make them more anxious or make them feel like they should be more avoidant based upon just what they experience. So, sometimes it's a matter of working through those own personal insecurities that allow you to, you know, extend yourself and be more vulnerable, which can establish better connection, right? And passionate interests as well. So even love to a degree, y'all have your own individual interests, right? That's natural. Every now and then you can extend yourself to be interested in what your partner is interested in, and that can help. It's almost like a form of supporting their individuality, which a lot of times is good. Psychologically, it's good when your partner supports your individual interests. A lot of times what creates more distance is partners who feel either offended or at competition with their partner's personal interests. So, if your partner got a creative gift that they do, if you're always on the other side of that, like, what about my time and what about this? That might put a negative vibration over everything. You know what I'm saying? You need to figure out ways that you can support them in what they do, because you know damn well you want support when you do your individual interests and you see them, you know what I'm saying? Otherwise, what's going to happen is in their personal interest, it's very common. That's why, like, it's very common that they'll find somebody who support that, and then it's like if you always trying to compete with their personal interests, you kind of in a sense remove yourself from their personal life. That creates distance. So you got to keep in mind that aspect. You should be their number one cheerleader, no matter, I'm not going to say no matter what they do, but you should be their cheerleader. If you're not supporting them, then who is? You know what I'm saying? And you got to keep in mind, like, it's like that's just how it works. You know what I'm saying? People, it's human nature to want to be around people who support what they personally into. And again, if you're trying to establish more trust and connection, you can't get that if you're always in opposition to what they're personally involved in and personally into. So this is why even if a person is needing space and stuff like that, you got to give them that space sometimes. You know what I'm saying? Um, yeah. So that's Venus away in Aries externally. Now, last but not least, we go into Scorpio. So Venus and Scorpio, aka Venus, away internally. So this is like doing being out at night and stuff like that. You outside the home, but it's nighttime. So this could be, this is in a lot of ways. It's like if you were to think like going out on the weekends or something like that, or running errands at night, or just vibing. So uh, I look at Venus in the position of Scorpio as love, as obsession, or sacred. So this is where we talk about trust and intimacy, and then sacrifice and investment. So you know, love can be obsessive. Like, this is where you know either obsessive or sacred. So when we think about obsession, this is where it gets. He said, "Can too much space lead to separation?" Yeah, essentially. But see, the thing about it is, everybody needs space. So it's about how y'all manage that. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, if y'all can come up again, going back to like Libra and Venus and Libra position, right? The home, or the system that y'all have, y'all need to come up with a system that works where you can have your own space and they can have their own space. Only way it becomes too much space. See, it's like, ironically, you gotta think ironically, by trying to lessen space. Like, if you a person who you might have anxious anxiety, right? Anxious attachment. So when the partner's trying to get space, you might start to question and feel like you need more reassurance and stuff like that. First of all, you should communicate that, right? But there's a way to establish that where you can still give your partner space, and then you could just let them know, like, hey, like, even though I want space, or it's like kind of coming from the angle of, I know you want space, but at the same time, if you could just tell me when you finna take that space, so that I could feel more comfortable and things like that. But then also you have to do the work to be cool and understand that, okay, my partner needs space, especially if it's something that they commonly do and things like that. You have to learn how to trust them to get that space, but then also come back to you, you know what I'm saying, and reestablish connection. And then they also have to be willing to let you know, communicate when they need space, and then also allow, they have to be willing to reestablish that connection with you to come back together. You know what I'm saying? Because space is inevitable. You say you in your skin, they in their skin. So space is inevitable. It's always going to be a level of space, but it's about what y'all connect on and establishing that connection and maintaining it. Um, it's like, yeah, too much space can lead to separation, but it's like mental space. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes people need a little time just to think to themselves, and then they're more refreshed and able to kind of re-engage. As long as there's re-engagement, it's fine. But but like I was saying, the irony of it is by being too smothering, you create space anyway. You know what I'm saying? If you always in somebody's face, then they gonna start to already like they're gonna start to want space, but it's gonna start to feel like they pushing you off. You know what I'm saying? And then there's some people who uh become distant based upon their own level of safety. And sometimes some people push away when they want closeness, and that's like a again going back to childhood upbringing and things that individuals go through that led them to do certain things as protection, defense mechanisms and stuff like that. That's why, like, again, that conversation, that communication to understand what each other developed or went through early stages in life. That's why that type of stuff matters, because it's like, the more you understand about where they at and where they come from, the better y'all can come to a better common ground on how to move forward, aka what works for both of y'all. And that lends itself to establishing a better, healthier system of relating. And that's the whole foundation of it. That's the type of stuff that should be when you're looking at marriage, somebody you really trying to marry or just be with lifelong. It's got to look like that. Like, y'all got to work towards creating systems that work for both of y'all. So how are we going to go about taking space and then establishing reconnection? You know what I'm saying? Especially if you say you an Aquarius. Ironically, Aquarius like space, but they also like closeness. So it's like sometimes they don't want to be all up under you, but at the end of the day, they still want to be connected. They still want to communicate and have that connection. And sometimes, especially like as an air sign, if you're dealing with a water sign or something like that, then that might get a little mixy. That might be a little weird to the water sign, because the water sign might take offense to that. Water signs want to be too connected sometimes. So you know what I'm saying? Again, and if you're the partner who needs the space and they the one who's more anxious, then you could also take the approach of just being like, again, initiating that communication to be like, hey, I need space, and explain to them, boom, boom, boom. And then when you're good, try not to make it too long. But if when you're good and you got yourself together, you took your little time, then establish that reconnection. You know, any examples that you do in your relationship? Um, Yeah, I mean, basically what I said is like sometimes you get to learn your partner. So like in my own relationship, it's like even we've been together we've been together for a certain amount of time to where, and again, I'm still learning too. So as I'm growing, I'm learning more things, and as she's growing, she's learning more things about herself and me, and vice versa. So what I've learned is that sometimes it's better to announce when you need space, or sometimes you can just observe when certain interactions is going on, and you can kind of tell, okay, there needs to be space. It's like I'm able to gauge when it's time to kind of extend myself to reconnect and things like that. Like, again, I'm not perfect with it, and we have a lot of conflict over that, because I'm a water sign, they are air signs. So sometimes, but it's a Libra type energy, so it's like all about relating. You know what I'm saying? And then certain seventh house energy. So it's like a lot of times my idea, and I'm a Pisces too. So like when I'm sometimes when I'm in my creative mode or I'm in my own zone, I get lost in it. And I had to learn that, I have to be able to step away from that to be able to re-engage. So what I did was I created a time, like, so what I do, I get up really early in the morning, and I try to do what I can as far as my creative endeavors to get lost in. I try to catch up on work, and then by the time it's time to engage with, the family and things like that, I'll come out and I'll establish that time. You know what I'm saying? And again, going on dates and setting times to do certain things, that helps. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, again, everybody in different circumstances and situations. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you might be in a long distance scenario, and even in a long distance, it's not going to be easy. But it's like you could even, it's like you got to really just set the time to reach out. You know what I'm saying? You got to set the time to establish that. But again, it takes time to figure out y'all levels of how much space each other need. And then also you have to be, what I did was I try to pay attention to when it's time to kind of close that gap. I try to pay attention to when it's time to get closer and when it's time to again, when we go through times in which it seems like we need space, not take it personally. You know what I'm saying? That's the biggest thing. Like, I try not to take it personally, because being that I'm dealing with an air sign, sometimes she's in that space where, she's not even saying it, but she needs space. It's clear, you know what I'm saying? Even though sometimes that space is like, sometimes, especially women, like, it'll be needing space but wanting closeness. So it's like, sometimes it'll be confusing and things like that. But, you know, for what I do, I try to pay attention to what it is. And sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it looked like give me space, but it's really get closer. You know what I'm saying? And I may make a mistake that way. But either way, what I understand is that in my own space is that, again, safety and connection. So for a relationship to work, you need connection. And in order to connect, you need to establish safety. So, being that I'm a man and she's a woman, I know that as a masculine energy, I have to kind of do things to provide that space for safety, right? And what I find is that when I provide that space for safety, I get more connection from her end. You know what I'm saying? So even in times where it seems like we need space, I take that time to go into my own space and calm my nervous system. You know what I'm saying? Calm, relax my nervous system so that I'm not too anxious, aka, because see, sometimes, like, I'll give you an example. Like, sometimes when I'm in an anxious space, the first thing I want to do is react. So I might be whatever feeling that I'm in, I might go extreme with it. Right now, my energies, I'm a Pisces sun, Leo moon. So sometimes my feelings is overbearing. Sometimes my feelings is extreme and shit like that. So it's like I have to acknowledge when I'm in a state of panic or I'm in a state of anxiety. So I don't always like space. I don't always like when it seems like there's rifts or disconnection in a relationship. It makes me like, hype. But what I found is that in those moments, what serves me better is to gather my own self, figure out how to regulate some of those more intense emotions so that I can come to a space where now I'm responding. And once I gather myself, I look to reestablish connection. And that's when I'm like, okay, I'm straight. Okay, now because I know when I respond and I'm engaging now to establish connection, I'm coming from a space that's able to think critically. And, even if it's still a hard time to get understanding or, whatever it is, I'm still in a strong enough space to be able to represent what the masculine energy needs to be doing at that time, which is at least establishing safety. So, AKA, I'm not being defensive. I'm not coming at a situation from an angle that's unnecessary. I'm not being extreme, overbearing in ways that make her feel uncomfortable to the point where she can't connect. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like establishing, laying the groundwork for connection to be had, right? Now, for a female's aspect, depending on what end of this you are on, it'll kind of be different. You know, say because a female's role is more so to fulfill the connection space once the safety is there. Like once you're safe enough to get in there, then you can kind of, because it kind of like without the details, yeah, say without the details of what you're going through, then and all that. But yeah, as far as examples from my actual relationship, that's really what I do. You know what I'm saying? It's like in that time of space to see, I guess to answer the question better, it's like you should consider the role or reason or responsibility space has in your partnership. Because, yeah, too much space equals separation. But if you're using space just to get away, then it's like you're not using space in the right way. That's when it becomes separation. But space should be for you to gather yourself, for you to get back in your right mind to be able to engage in a healthy way. That's really what space should be for, rather than space as in, oh, I just can't wait to get away. Because see, when you start thinking like that and you use space for that, of course, that's going to lead to separation because down the side, you don't really want to be there. But, you know, that's what I use space for. I use space for more so to gather myself so that I can respond in a healthy way. Where now, whatever I do to re-engage connection is going to be on the path of rebuilding rather than in a path of, okay, I got my break. Because see, the thing is, even if you look at space like a time to get away or escapism, you really never going to get enough of that, and it's going to become more of a habit to want to keep doing that. So every time something heavy comes along, you're going to be running away just to be like, "Whew, I can't wait to." And that's the wrong perspective. Like again, going back to the notes and stuff like that. The one thing about Venus and all these positions is still about connection. You know what I'm saying? How do you get space living together? I mean, different rooms. You know what I'm saying? Different rooms. Sometimes you just be like, hey, I gotta go to a different room. You know what I'm saying? That it could be like that. And sometimes even if you in the same room, uh, having different hobbies and things like that. Sometimes if you put the TV on, they watching TV, maybe you need to put headphones on. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you need to go on the porch or something like that. Maybe you need to go on the deck. It's like you could get actual space. You can go to the living room, go to this. If y'all are living in a confined space, it's more difficult, but even in the same room, y'all could be into different things. You know what I'm saying? Whether whatever you do as a creative outlet, you can get in your zone and do that. Like I'll go to the office or something like that. I'll be in the office, I'll make some music or something, and then, you know, again, yeah. And then I've been in situations where I spent too much time in the office or too much time in the studio and stuff like that. And of course that becomes a problem. But all the while it's about trying to be better at understanding what each other needs and understanding what each other is trying to communicate. You know what I'm saying? There's always going to be something to kind of pick at and say, well, what's about this? What about that? It's like, you know, sometimes you might need to go take a walk. You know what I'm saying? You might need to literally, but again, there's ways to go about that, better ways than negative ways. You know what I'm saying? Better ways as in like, hey, I'm taking a walk. Like, don't just, you shouldn't just walk out and just storm out and stuff like that. Because again, especially if you're dealing with someone who's more anxious, you might cause panic, and that's even more of a problem. But sometimes you be so heated, you'll do something like that and not care how somebody else feel. But again, you got to get better at establishing that. You know what I'm saying? Like that's something, like I said, we all make mistakes. I made mistakes like that too, where, early on in a relationship, how I handled conflict and stuff is very different than how I try to handle it now. You know what I'm saying? But one thing about it is there should be certain lines that you just don't cross. You know what I'm saying? It's certain lines that you just say you shouldn't cross. You know what I'm saying? And that's where the real baseline is. It's like, you have to have a certain level of discipline to know what lines you're not going to cross, and vice versa for them. You know what I'm saying? There's certain just unspoken or spoken. You know what I'm saying? Certain things that you just shouldn't do, but and that's kind of where that conflict is able to kind of be healthy, because you want to be with somebody you can have healthy conflict with, not somebody you feel like you got to be on eggshells with and not engage with. You know what I'm saying? But yeah. So going back to Venus and Scorpio and Venus being away, love can be obsessive or it can be sacred. So this is kind of what we even talk about, like Scorpio energy, even down to sex, where some people go and have frivolous sex with any and everybody and stuff like that. But that's kind of going too far. A lot of times people in that space might be trying to do that to fill some kind of void versus sex, what we know as a sacred exchange of energy. You know what I'm saying? Sex can be sacred and or should be, in a more healthy sense, can be sacred, and that leads to that's the aspect of intimacy. But see, also Venus sometimes has a hard time with trust. Trust issues can make it difficult to actually connect on those deeper levels. Now Scorpio is opposite Taurus, so they share the axis of vulnerability. You know what I'm saying? Without proper vulnerability, that safety, connection, and security, there really can't be a strong connection of trust. AKA that also affects how y'all connect when it comes to sex and things like that. So, this is where and then also think about like relationships where there isn't a lot of comfort or there isn't a lot of safety. This is where trust issues kind of run rampant and they become obsessive, where you get a person who's obsessive about either not being stung or they're over hyper, like, they too much into their head about what could be happening and stuff like that. And you get people who go to the extreme and overboard trying to, you know, again, do that Scorpio thing, whether it be investigation, whether it be all the things that kind of come from trust issues. And sometimes things happen that damage trust and things like that. But the damage of trust is, again, a lack of that comfort and a lack of that security. So if you're an individual who created the issue of lack of trust, right? Sometimes people come into relationships with trust issues. And so you have to understand and acknowledge when safety needs to be established, or you need to incorporate more safety in that partnership. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, even if you are the person with trust issues, you have to have there's a self responsibility to also acknowledge where you might be going too far. And there might be times in which you have to kind of work through that or alleviate some of that pressure on yourself in order to allow trust to be able to be flowed and engaging in that space. You know what I'm saying? So, that's one of the things, and part of that also sacrifice and investment. It's like part of that support, part of that love and appreciation and value. It, for love to operate right, and this is the more dark, more difficult side of love, is it requires a level of sacrifice. It requires a level of you being able to put aside aspects of your ego and what might make you feel comfortable for the sake of what's better for the relationship. Now, what I'm not saying is sacrifice on the end of being toxic and destructive to yourself. Again, we have to have a healthy level of self-esteem and safety in oneself, so that we don't become hyper dependent and we don't overdo it when it comes to attaching ourselves or becoming obsessed with another individual, right? But at the same time, from a healthy perspective, when you're in a healthy mind state and you have a healthy sense of self, the proper things to sacrifice that don't require you to abandon or abuse yourself. So there's things that might be uncomfortable, but again, a certain level of sacrifice is needed in order for a relationship to operate and work at its best. Also, love in and of itself is an investment, so you want to invest your time into somebody who's worth that. You know what I'm saying? But if you don't have a healthy sense of your own value and your own worth, you might devalue yourself by investing into the wrong people, places, and things. You know what I'm saying? Even down to things, drugs or substances, or things that you don't need to be spending time in. If again, love also, Venus also relates to what we can consider habits or what we can consider things. So these things that we might be overly obsessed with, and we might look to make us feel uh, more valuable, or like how people will chase different things, like fancy car, fancy material things and things like that. They might spend all their time trying to acquire these things, just to realize that these things hold no real value. These things don't actually make them feel loved, appreciated, valued, and supported. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you got to make sure you understanding that with Venus energy, you're investing your time and energy into the right places, even money and things like that. Don't be spending all your time with a type of person who doesn't value you. You know what I'm saying? Don't be spending time, again, and this kind of speaks to some of those, because when we talk about Aries and Scorpio, we can start to talk about taboo relationships. When we get into concepts of situationships, friends with benefits, and things like that, you have to value yourself enough to not get taken advantage of in these types of scenarios too, or even partnerships with businesses and things like that. Let's say, like me, I'm a videographer, and I've been in situations where, uh, again, early on, in order to, somebody want to work with you, and they'll say, oh, I can't pay you, but I'll give you some good promo. And yeah, that might be cool at some instances, but it got to a point where it's like, hold on, no, I need to get paid. I need to, what I'm providing as a service isn't being valued in this space. So I might have to turn this job down. I might have to turn that contract down, just because I'm not being valued in this space in the proper way. And that's something that you have to establish for yourself as far as what you're worth. And then it's okay sometimes to take a invest in something for the long term, and you might not be getting the most in the moment, but that, again, that's a very personal thing where you have to assess that for yourself. you know but yeah, Venus and Scorpio. And even when it comes to, like I said, investments of time, you might be dealing with a person who then told you straight up that they're not looking for anything stable or a relationship long term. But here you are investing a great deal of energy, time, and effort into them. And again, what are you getting back? You know what I'm saying? And that you might have to reassess what you're getting in this investment of time. You know what I'm saying? Y'all haven't made no, y'all haven't made no commitments, y'all haven't, really set any goals as far as what y'all want to achieve together. So it comes down to a situation where it's like, hey, what I'm saying, what are you really doing? Is you wasting time? Is this a good investment? Or is you about to be left kind of high and dry at the end of it all? You know what I'm saying? And again, a lot of these, it all kind of comes back to, when we look at Scorpio transformation, Pluto, Pluto and Mars. So again, both of these energies share Mars. So this is where a lot of conflicts come from. A person's independence, aka Aries, and Scorpio, a person's level of trust and ability to feel, deep and intimate and close, but also a person still like, insecurities to that degree and things like that. That's where a lot of conflict derives. But also, last but not least, also people's transformations, growth, and things like that. Because uh, with Scorpio, specifically Pluto, transformation, y'all go through different transformations together. There's certain parts of yourself that through that relationship are going to naturally have to be sacrificed, die off. You know what I'm saying? And it's not about losing yourself. You need to know who you are, right? But as you grow together, there's going to be certain things that you start to acknowledge and have to let go of in order for that relationship to keep flowing. You know what I'm saying? Certain things you might be attached to and you might be emotionally biased, or again, even down to grudges. A person might have did something to you and you hold that grudge. Well, guess what? That grudge can start to affect y'all ability to stay stable and connected. So if that grudge is affecting connection, then it's like, look, you gotta let that go. You're gonna have to transform that, even if you do hold it dearly. But this is where you know who you're dealing with. If the person has expressed remorse or shown signs of actually growing and changing their ways in certain aspects too, you have to be able to let go of that and be like, you know what, it might just be my trust issues interacting, it might just be my obsession or whatever it is. And see, all of those things help to establish more acts of what makes a relationship sacred. You know what I'm saying? And that kind of proves my point of how Venus and all these different aspects, it matters. You know what I'm saying? They all play a role. And again, of course, this is only 6 signs. So there's 6 other signs that Venus could be in that play a role, but these are the main prominent ones because these are highlighting the highest point, the lowest point, what's home, and what's home also, but internally, and then also what's away externally and away internally. So, when we're more so on the Scorpio end, in the Venus position, we're away from the internal aspects of what makes Venus more comfortable. But understand that the balance of these, just like how, again, the balance of Taurus and Scorpio energy makes for a successful relationship. Same way that Aries and Libra, opposites away from each other, but that is what makes a healthy relationship. You need conflict, you need individuality, but then you also need, and then with Scorpio, what makes Scorpio good is like that behind closed doors energy, whether that be sex, but also the deep, intense conversations, maybe even deep, intense conflict, the stuff that y'all, being able to be safe with each other's secrets, for y'all to have secrets of y'all own. You know what I'm saying? That's what creates that intimacy and that closeness on a level, and that's highly important. So you can't just look at it like, oh, well, Venus and Scorpio bad, Venus and Virgo bad, Venus and Aries bad. No, it's just another aspect of love as love's nature. It's just another aspect of the nature of love. So again, even on the more dramatic degree, and like I was saying about Virgo, the work involved to be able to go through all these different things is what makes it's stable, is what makes it even worth experiencing. But a lot of times people stop at the first thing, the exaltation, the romance, what I seen on TV and in the movies that made me feel like, yeah, love is some kind of fantasy land, or the first moment we met where everything was honeymoon. That's just unrealistic to be able to maintain forever. It's like when you really look at it, it's a lot more that goes behind it. And so altogether, this makes up the psychology of Venus. So if you're trying, again, incorporating Venus in your life, you now understand the different points of Venus, and now you can establish, okay, when you're going through your different love scenarios, you can understand all these different pieces. And so you can start to come up with better ways to approach these things in your life, whether it be with a person, a place, a thing, business, again, whether you got addiction issues or whether, you're trying to get involved in a hobby and things like that, all these different things all make up what Venus is going through and things like that. So, yeah. So hopefully this was helpful. Um, yeah, if you are looking to get a personal consultation, you can hit me up at 717conference.info@gmail.com. And yeah, this is about to be a series. We're going to go through all the planets so that we can get a better perspective on how all these things interact. And like I was saying before, too, regardless of what sign you have Venus in, you can just understand Venus as a nature as a whole first, and then incorporate your own energy, house placement, and all those different things to make your situation better or to help you manage and get through a difficult time that you might be going through. You know what I'm saying? Because these things are helpful for that too. If you're having a bad time or hard luck when it comes to love, you understand maybe what went wrong and maybe what to establish and get yourself better on so you can have healthier relationships moving forward. Yep, that's all I got. Much love, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.